Till that when future US President Lyndon B. Johnson was Senate Majority Leader, he instructed his staff to make his scotch and soda significantly weaker than his guests, so that he could keep a clearer head. LBJ was very interesting. Johnson seems to have turned this kind of behavior into an important part of the Johnson treatment. It was a way to establish a kind of macho dominance over the people he was speaking to, and, more importantly, it let him show off his penis. While standing at the urinal, he would sometimes swing around to continue the conversation he was having, his genitals hanging free. Once he even pointed it out to a lawmaker standing next to him and asked, "You ever seen anything this big?" Johnson then continued speaking about some upcoming legislation as he swung his penis around in his hand. https://historycollection.com/LBJ used one thing control others around became known Johnson treatment/2/ The tapes of him ordering slacks from Hager are priceless. It seems to have worked. The guy was a master at pushing through legislation. David Geffen * basically did that in the 70s. He was the only one in the room not on drugs when record deals were happening. So I've read, anyway. The strippers at the local club does the same thing. Considering how weak the drinks are, they must be drinking colored water. I used to teach workshops with an old-time photojournalist who was a notorious drinker. His drink was gin and tonic, and I adopted that as my drink too, so I could go to the bar and bring back one gin and tonic for him and one club soda with lime for me. LBJ was the epitome of an old-school politician. TIL, if you talk about LBJ on Reddit, you're going to find out how big his dick was. Similar to the story of the creation of the Gibson cocktail by Hugh Simons Gibson. From what I've read about Lyndon Johnson, this is very on brand for Lyndon Johnson. Old boss I had used to tell the bartender he would have a gin and tonic with either lime or lemon. The bartender knew that lime meant with and lemon meant without gin. Watched him drink many guys under the table during negotiations. Apparently in medieval times, it was a common tactic to invite your adversary to dinner and drinks in an apparent bid for peace, and then just fucking murder them once they were good and hammed. Old guy here. My dad was an executive for a Fortune 500 company back in the 1960s. He had a dry bar in his office that included a vodka bottle filled with water that he sometimes used to make his own martinis while serving the real thing to his guests. Out here playing chess, while everybody else is playing checkers. PFF. Amateur. Eat a healthy meal and outdrink your political opponents like a man. Or just cheat with Adderall or similar amphetamines. Holy fuck, future president? You mean? He is gonna come back from the grave to rule over the US. So he could be more in control of himself when he whipped out his dick, put it on the table and said that's why at the end of an argument, some abbing he apparently did regularly. I knew a bar owner that would do the same thing. Anytime someone would buy him a shot, it would be a fake shot with no alcohol. Scotch and soda, what kind of heathens do you have over there? Russian agents just bring slightly less poisoned drinks to their parties. My history teacher in high school used to say that Johnson would corner people in rooms and play with their earlobes. Couldn't think of anything more uncomfortable. And here I am, drinking a fuckton on the regular, so that when I go out I outdrink pretty much everyone regardless. My wife frowns upon it. I really miss the days when we were allowed to drink heavily at work. Now they're all like, you can't drink and fly a 747, that's dangerous. My grandfather, who was captain of several ships, did the same thing. He had 2 bottles of whiskey in his captain's quarters. One was mostly just watered down whiskey and some food coloring, the other was some expensive bottle that he would treat his guest to. He never really liked alcohol, I'm much the same really. His life stories was really interesting, shame I never sat down and wrote his memoirs properly, would probably make for an interesting book. My take on this is, good for him. I see nothing morally wrong with this because it's up to each individual to regulate their alcohol intake and accept the consequences of their actions, and that should have pretty much nothing to do with how much others are drinking, or appear to be drinking. If I'm out with friends and I'm the driver, I'm going to have one drink. Full stop, no extenuating circumstances. Why? Because I have a responsibility to fulfill. If I'm a reporter and my responsibility is write an accurate story to inform my readers, it's my own duty to know my own limits and retain a clear head. If I'm an opposition politician and it's my responsibility to drive a good compromise for my constituents, it's my own duty to know my own limits and retain a clear head. But we currently live in the age of blame, and this worldview is somewhat passé. God damn it, the lead post should include a citation. This comes from Robert Caro's epic Johnson biography. This is a man's life's work and TIL gets to throw out random factoids and sound smart. Cite your source in the lead, the person, not some random website. Edit I noticed history.com, link source website did the same thing. What a jackass move. Understand that history is the work that someone did to make the past accessible. At the very least, sharing the source can provide you with an entree into the work of a great historian, especially someone like Caro. Source from memory, Robert Caro, Master of the Senate, 2002. My head is clearer when I'm drunk face with tears of joy. I read scotch as scotch. I'm sitting here like a dumb ass wondering what a scotch is. I need some sleep. Best decision I made during my 3-month COVID furlough from work was starting Robert Caro's The Years of Lyndon Johnson series on audiobook. Absolutely fascinating works. I love Lyndon B above all other presidents besides maybe Washington. This is not uncommon. I had a department manager once that would instruct the bartenders at the annual broker outing to always serve him club soda no matter what. I only saw him tipsy once at an anniversary party. It's a good thing he didn't do that often, because he got very honest and open about people when he drank. There's a similar story, probably apocryphal, about Martini, the French diplomat and eponym of the cocktail. He allegedly had instructions that all rounds served to him after the first be constituted of water, to give him the upper hand in negotiations. Oh, and he attacked Canadian Prime Minister Pearson over a public scolding. Ah, good old Lyndon B. I'll have those NS voting Democrat for 200 years Johnson. LBJ sounds like a Mexican superhero that defeats his enemies by sucking them off. LBJ. Adam Carolla guest on some podcast many years ago. To be honest, your favorite rapper/DJ does this too. There's no way you could function if you actually drank like that every time you went out. Can't remember who was saying they would get the waiter to just know to only bring him straight Coke and pretend otherwise, while watching other people try to outdrink him to impress him. Gives a person a huge advantage in that situation. Paul Newman used the same trick in The Sting when playing his mark at a poker game. Dash a little pure gin as cologne so the table thinks you're wasted, but drink mostly water. The take home here is that it was perfectly normal for senators to drink scotch while making decisions. This isn't very long ago. There was a merchant in Spice and Wolf that tried to run a scheme like this, but it was with watered-down wine to try to impair the judgment of the protagonists, when the expectation was water. LBJ story time. My grandfather was a New Jersey state trooper, and when LBJ was in town for something, my grandfather was on his detail. A Native American woman and her children walked in front of the property and LBJ said, "Get those of my property, trooper." My grandfather just stared in disbelief, went to his squad car, and gave the kids some stuffed animals he had for kids, and walked them home.